The words of Chechnya. Ramzan Kadyrov continues to keep the population of Chechnya in fear. However, instances of resistance still occur. Despite the suppression of the Chechen liberation movement against Russia, Kadyrov is fighting these manifestations with harsh methods. Kadyrov had a very harsh falling out with the Kremlin. Sources from the VCHK UGPU channel report that Ramzan wants to effectively hand over the republic to his 17-year-old son Adam. Allegedly, the presidential administration did not like that the head of Chechnya is secretly negotiating with Middle Eastern monarchies for security guarantees for himself and his family. And Ksenia Sobchak, who is linked to the Russian security services and is Putin's goddaughter, has already posted accusations against Ramzan Kadyrov and asked what Moscow, that is the Kremlin, Putin, the FSB, will say. The Kremlin has already avoided commenting on the situation, and FSB officers are now using this in their struggle against Ramzan Kadyrov. The consequences for Ramzan Kadyrov and his conflict with the Kremlin, we'll discuss this right now with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev. I
am convinced that the authorities have become completely weak. They've lost all sense of boundaries. They seriously feel that their end is near. They've started making mistakes.
Sources from the VCHK OGPU channel report that Ramzan Kadyrov now wants to effectively hand over the republic to his 17-year-old son Adam, who was once again awarded another honor just the other day. And because of this, Ramzan Kadyrov had a falling out with the Kremlin. There have already been important stories written about the history between the Kremlin and Kadyrov, but they cited a different reason. Supposedly, the presidential administration didn't like that the head of Chechnya was secretly negotiating with Middle Eastern monarchies for security guarantees for himself and his family. We discussed this with you before, but now the VCHK OGPU channel is presenting it in a different light. Probably VCHK OGPU is connected to the Russian security services. I don't have that information, but I'd like to discuss all of this with you. Yes.
It is directly connected to the FSB, and these are indeed FSB employees, as I have previously stated. However, I continue to adhere to the version I mentioned before. To further confirm and clarify that point, I would like to remind our viewers that the most recent award received by Kadyrov's son was, in fact, from the National Guard of Russia. More specifically, it was awarded by Zolotov, who is a person known to be very close to President Putin. This connection is important to note, as it highlights the close ties between these individuals and the Russian leadership. By doing this, they demonstrated and showed us that the Kadyrov family has no problems with Putin. The FSB is stirring this up through, let's say, organizations or certain forums that are influenced by the FSB. They are spinning this mechanism, this information flywheel, and creating the impression of a conflict between Putin and Kadyrov. There is no such conflict yet. There is no conflict between Putin and Kadyrov. Kadyrov continues to loyally serve Putin. Putin is not irritated by his behavior in any way or anywhere. Here, the conflict is between the FSB and Kadyrov. I repeat, in this particular conflict, in the end, of course, the FSB will ultimately win. Because, frankly speaking, Putin's political power is actually fundamentally based on the FSB, on its organizational structure and the current situation. Overall, throughout Russia, Putin's power relies on the FSB. I think that this conflict does not exist yet, but the FSB is doing everything to make it happen. I assure you, Dasha, that when this conflict between Kadyrov and Putin truly does happen, we will find out about it very quickly. It will become known to everyone at lightning speed. At the very least, I will know about it because I receive information from people who are very close to Kadyrov. The most important thing is that in Moscow, at Kadyrov's representative office, which carries out the most important assignments, the first thing they will do is start putting pressure on Kadyrov's representatives in Moscow. And if this happens, and as soon as it happens, I think we will definitely discuss it.
Made the following statement. Is this legal? Yes. Is Ramzan Kadyrov's regime currently following Russian laws? That's the question. I'm just clarifying. What if they're not following them? What if they're once again living by their own self-made rules? And the eternal questions. A, when will Chechnya start living like Russia? That's the question. And B, what will Moscow say? Is Ksenia Sobchak generally associated with the FSB? with the Russian security services. So I would like us, first and foremost, to analyze this post by Putin's goddaughter from an analytical perspective.
I think that you are absolutely right. And I am quite sure that you are putting the emphasis exactly in the right place. Sobchak, in this particular context, is basically saying almost exactly what the FSB is currently saying right now. Right now, the FSB, that is the Federal Security Service, and this will be used as a claim or, let's say, as an accusation or allegation against Kadyrov and his regime, as it stands. Now, all of a sudden, they're going to start recalling that the Chechen Republic must abide by the constitution, even though from the very beginning, when they created this regime, they said, you can break any rule you want, just kill Chechens, that's all. And now they've taken a different path. They're broadcasting things they previously forbade themselves from doing. This points to a conflict between the FSB and Kadyrov. At different stages, different assessments are given. I can confidently assert that in this struggle, the FSB will win because it is a deep-rooted organization that is essentially the backbone of Russian power and the backbone of the Russian state. And that's why in this struggle, I think the Chechen and pro-Moscow authorities will be defeated. Because very soon, they will need the Chechen sympathy towards the authorities. They will really need the Chechens to protect them. But that sympathy doesn't exist.
When Sobchak wrote, "What will Moscow say?" she was essentially giving carte blanche to the words of the FSB and Putin. I would like us to discuss this together. What further actions could the Kremlin, the war, Putin, and the Russian security services take? Putin
will do nothing. Kadyrov's key emissaries, Alaudinov and others, are participating very actively and visibly on the front lines in the war. At least they are actively promoting it, actively supporting the attack and invasion of Ukraine. So nothing will be initiated there. There won't be any open conflict either. The time hasn't come yet. Right now, it is currently just being set up in order to prepare the subconscious minds of all viewers, not only Russians, but truly everyone, to get ready to become mentally prepared for the idea that in Chechnya, the Kadyrovites behaved improperly, not in accordance with Russian laws and not in accordance with human laws either. And this needs to be dealt with. This needs to be put to an end. And then everyone will remember, yes, they did this back then, and that too, but they were acting on orders from the FSB, and now the FSB is using it against them. I think everything is moving toward this at cosmic speed, and it's happening because Russia's defeat by Ukraine is also progressing. By autumn, we'll already be seeing the outlines of Ukraine's victory. Everything is heading in that direction. And within Russia itself, the FSB and everyone else understand and realize this.
Dear audience, please like this video and share your analysis of the situation in Russia and Chechnya in the comments. It's very interesting. And support our channel, like, subscribe, and also leave a few questions in the comments in support of Ukraine's dignity. Ruslan Kutayev, when you said that in this confrontation the FSB will win, what do you mean and what does it actually mean for the FSB to win? How will this actually happen in reality and what does an FSB victory mean?
Russian power itself is built on the structure of the FSB, NKVD, VCHK, KGB, and all branches of authority, from the president to various ministers, departments, and the presidential administration. All of this is made up of FSB employees, FSB agents, and FSB informants. This is the established ideological doctrine of the Russian world. It was created specifically by FSB employees from the Russian Orthodox Church, from the Moscow Patriarchate of the Russian Orthodox Church, and the administration of the President of Russia. In other words, the FSB is the very power of Russia. And when it becomes absolutely clear that Russia is losing and has lost this war, then they will start looking for those to blame, and they will begin to sort things out among themselves. I have never seen a single region be able to defeat, say, an empire. And here in the region of Chechnya, the Chechen authorities, despite all their considerable power, immense strength, and extensive armament, are ultimately doomed to inevitable defeat. because they are in reality just a small cog in the much larger and more complex mechanism known as the Russian FSB, the formidable security service and power structure of Vladimir Putin. And this particular cog always turns at the will and command of Putin himself. But why does this power still hold on? Because Putin has not made a decision. Because there is Putin's favor and loyalty. He is the one who keeps this power in place. As soon as his favor ends, this power will inevitably and completely collapse, fall apart, and disintegrate.
I was just talking with Olesya Batsman literally right before our interview, the well-known journalist, and she told me that in a conversation with Vladimir Osechkin on her YouTube channel, Vladimir Osechkin shared the following. According to his information and his sources, a coup is being prepared in the Kremlin in the near future, a palace coup, and that Prigozhin's mutiny will repeat itself, only this time it will be organized by other people. Of course, right now this sounds rather unrealistic. Undoubtedly, you have some connections and so on, channels of information. I would like to discuss with you how likely you think it is that Putin could be overthrown and which Kremlin faction might be behind it.
There will be no overthrow of Putin. From time to time. Those forces that in principle would be ready to do this are appeased. One moment Putin is in the fridge, the next they're about to overthrow him. Any minute now, just wait, he'll be overthrown. And these people actually believe that this will happen, but it won't happen. No one is going to overthrow Putin because they're all connected. They're all tied together. But there is another force which I've been insisting on from the very beginning that is not connected to them. These are the ones they've driven to the front lines, into the trenches over there on the Ukrainian front. And there they've risen from lieutenants to colonels. And there they oppress their own Russian soldiers. There they conduct negotiations and they kill and they execute. And this new breed of Russians raised there in the trenches of Ukraine, if anything is going to be done, it will be done by them. In Russian tradition, there is no precedent for generals from academic institutions, graduates of some military academies, to have rebellion against the Tsar in their subconscious. But those who are there, you see, they organize brothels there, right on the front lines. They set up brothels, they sell drugs, they sell vodka, they pass sentences, they execute people, they send the disabled, the wounded on crutches ahead into battle. Life there is completely different. And these people, even if the war is stopped, I've talked about this on our show with you, even if, say, it's on Russia's terms, Russia wins, the war is stopped, what? Are they going to keep those 2 million people crippled, not just in body, but in mind over there? No, they have to come back there. And these people will do everything they can to make sure this government doesn't continue to exist. This is a huge force, an organized force, an armed force. And that's why Putin will never, under any circumstances, let these people leave that frontline zone. Because that's where the danger of a coup lies. That's the risk of an attempt to overthrow the regime. Everything else is just a distraction. It's done on purpose to distract us, Dasha, and Ukrainians in general. Like, don't worry too much about anything. They're about to be overthrown anyway. They won't be overthrown. Putin hasn't been overthrown.
So, to wrap up our stream today, when I read analysts, including Western ones, they write the following: the longer Putin wages an aggressive war against Ukraine, the longer he will remain in power. In other words, the continuation of the so-called special military operation, or rather Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, is currently the key to the survival of the Kremlin regime. What do you think?
That's correct. But who said that this war, this sluggish phase, has to continue like this? For Putin to be overthrown, a breakthrough at the front would be enough. It wasn't for nothing that they entered the Belgorod or Kursk regions from the rear. But if the Ukrainian army breaks through the front in Donbas and advances into the Rostov and Belgorod regions, in that case, the retreating orcs with shattered psyches will march on Moscow. That is what would mean the overthrow of Putin's regime. That's the way it has to be. And Ukraine has no intention of sitting in the trenches and waiting for decades. Ukraine is waiting, and with technological and technical advancements, it will definitely achieve its breakthrough and will certainly win. So no one is planning to wait, and this assessment is correct. Putin is ready to continue the war in this sluggish phase for decades. Why? Because in this state, he will be able to hold on to his power. No one will try to overthrow him. There is no organized force that would want to, could, or would even allow his overthrow. That's the truth of the matter.
Finally, the arrested general will return to the front, but in a new role. Former commander of the 58th Army, Ivan Popov, previously accused of corruption, will return to the front, but not as the head of the army, this time as the commander of the Storm Z unit. This format, which also recruits prisoners, became an unexpected turn after his appeal to Putin to restore order. We all remember this general, Ivan Popov. It was precisely the protest of this battle-hardened general, the army's uprising against Putin, that Putin feared. That's when, if you recall, the mass arrests of the Russian army's top brass began. Vladimir Vladimirovich, could people like the former commander of the 58th Army, Ivan Popov, potentially turn against Putin's regime in the future? Yes.
We remember this Spartacus, we remember his gladiator spirit, we remember that he was sympathetic to Prigozhin. And in fact, actually, at least according to some sources, he was indeed the most highly respected person in the frontline zone, respected by his own soldiers and subordinates. And this person, in his appearance in the trenches on the front line, and indeed, at least it has been stated that he personally signed up and is ready to go as a company commander. It could be a battalion, but not higher and not more than that. This person, if he manages to survive, if he is able to endure and adapt to these extremely difficult and challenging conditions, could very well be the one who ends up harboring deep feelings of resentment and hatred. These emotions might grow within him as a result of the hardships, the ongoing struggles, and the emotional toll that these circumstances impose on him. He is not appearing on the front out of patriotic feelings right now. He hates everything connected to the Ministry of Defense, which essentially handed him over. He absolutely despises those who set him up and harbors a deep resentment toward them. And this will be a very serious and significant test for him personally. If he manages, it's important to note, he will have to identify and find those specific people at the front lines who are, in principle, already ready. He won't have time to create, organize, or gather together an entirely new army or assemble a group of people who could potentially do it. Or maybe he already has them. By the way, just to mention, some military unit actually recommended and petitioned for him to be sent there. So there are some hopes that he could rise up, because there were already prerequisites for this back when he was still a general.
Ramzan Kadyrov has major problems with the FSB. Moreover, you mentioned that the FSB is deliberately creating a situation where rumors are being spread that the head of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov, is supposedly fleeing from the Kremlin. And right away, there's this new appointment of his sign. Why is this being done?
If you remember, I told you right here at this very spot, when we were talking about this before, just a little while ago, and I was convinced and knew that this was a fake story planted by the FSB and picked up by those who sympathize with the FSB. I told you right here on this very page that it would follow that within a week, President Vladimir Putin would either reward someone from Kadyrov's inner circle or promote them or do something to clearly show people in Russia that his relationship with Ramzan Kadyrov is normal, stable, and that nothing has changed at all. And so, first and foremost, this is a signal from Putin that everything with Ramzan and his family is just as it always has been. That's the first point. Second, I don't know, maybe you and I have talked about this, but I've spoken a lot about it when questions were raised about involving Ramzan Kadyrov's children and family in government structures. I said that he probably doesn't actually want this himself. Many insisted that he was the one pulling them in. I categorically said that if he could have his own way, he wouldn't let his children and close relatives anywhere near power. So I want to connect the appointment of Adam Kadyrov as the curator of the Ministry of Internal Affairs with the dismissal, resignation, or stepping down of Ramzan Kadyrov's 3 daughters from their high-ranking positions: deputy prime minister, minister, some department head, director. It's all connected. When Ramzan Kadyrov's health was seriously compromised, the FSB of Russia, it doesn't matter for what reason, whether he was poisoned or it was really his kidneys or his pancreas, Right now, that's not fundamentally important. His life was in danger at that time. The Kremlin rushed to install his children as the new leaders of the region because, contrary to all the predictions of amateurs, no one from his inner circle would have been appointed to head the Chechen Republic. If someone from his close associates had taken over, it would have led to a struggle, or maybe even a war. If one of the rival groups is put in charge, the others will enter into conflict. I knew and insisted that only the Kadyrov family could inherit the throne. So his children, the girls, were considered because of concerns about Ramzan Kadyrov's health. Today, I can confidently say that the health crisis of Ramzan Kadyrov has passed. Now we can confidently say that at least because of that illness, he is not currently in critical condition, and that his boys can grow up until it is time to replace him. That is why the girls have left power, and the appointment of Adam Kadyrov to such a high position is a sign from the Kremlin's overseers. The Russian presidential administration has already made their choice and selected Kadyrov's successor, the heir to the governance of the Chechen Republic. To be more precise, he has already been determined, and that is Adam Kadyrov. Accordingly, his new appointment and the departure of his daughters from politics and power, all of this together defines the behavior of the Kremlin and the Russian presidential administration.
Adam Kadyrov will be the heir to the throne, and who is placing their bets on him today? The Kremlin, the National Guard?
No, the National Guard, Zolotov, the FSB, they are merely indirect players in the big Kremlin game. All of this is determined by Putin. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Kadyrov is Putin's project. This is not a project of the presidential administration, and certainly not of the FSB. This is Vladimir Putin's project. He is the one who decides who should inherit in the event of loss, death, murder, or a traffic accident. If something happens to Kadyrov, to Ramzan, then someone from this family must inherit, no matter what. And that someone who can do it has already been chosen. That person is Adam Kadyrov, and the decision has already been made. When was that decision made? When his daughters left power, and when he was appointed as the curator of the Ministry of Internal Affairs at 17, at 18, when he becomes an adult, he will definitely start working as Deputy Prime Minister of the Chechen Republic and will oversee law enforcement agencies.
Dear audience, as always, please like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dasha Shaslivaya, and write a few words in support of Ukraine in the comments. I am very grateful for every like, every comment, and every subscription from you. Thank you very much. President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev. Every time, every week, Ruslan Mukhamadovic and I discuss the key current events in Ukraine, Russia, and around the world. Ruslan Mukhamadovic, thank you, and as always, see you soon.
All the best, Dasha. Take care and have a great day to all the viewers.